And a very good evening to you, and welcome to Politics 101. Politics 101 on Wednesday evening, the day after the long emancipation weekend. Welcome to all of you. If you're joining us from Guyana, a very good evening to you. Joining us from the rest of our Caribbean, good evening. Good evening, New York, the United States of America, Washington, D.C., the South, Atlanta, Georgia, South Carolina. Good evening to you. Good evening to you, my people, my friends, my family there in Arizona, Maryland, Washington, D.C. Good evening. Welcome to you. Welcome to all of you who are joining us from London. Good evening. And those of you who are joining us from other parts of Europe, good night, good night, good night, good night, and welcome to all of you. Welcome if you are joining us from Suriname, French Guyana, all of you. Good evening, Donna, Nigel, Winston, Clifton. Good evening, good evening. Good evening to you all. Enville, my friend Donnet, who I didn't get to spend as much time as I would want to. And she was in Buxton recently, but we'll make it up. We'll make it up. Good evening, Peggy, Russell, Donna Joseph. Good evening. Welcome to Politics 101. Lots of people to thank. Emancipation weekend. It was quite a weekend. Started, as you know, the weekend started. It was, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Monday, of course, was the 31st, but it was Emancipation Eve, and then we had Emancipation on Tuesday. Welcome all of you down to Politics 101. Good evening and good night. Welcome to all you beautiful people that I met over the last couple of days. The people of Buxton, of course, and its environs. And we had quite a time in Buxton on the 31st. Emancipation Eve, it was beamed live. Good evening. Uvorn, good evening. Good evening to you, Uvorn. I haven't seen you around in a long time. Karen, I just want to thank you. Karen, you are a very, very, very loyal supporter. Loyal, and I want to thank you, Karen, for your contributions. Thank you so much for your contributions. Good evening to all of you, Sandra, Joseph. I want to thank all of you who contributed to our Emancipation Fund, and we were able to make donations, of course, to Buxton. We made donations to Belladrum, El Dorado, Golden Fleece area. And we made a donation to Coffee 250. So we went beyond. We thought that we were going to contribute to Buxton alone, but we got enough. And I want to thank all of you who contributed to the Politics 101 Emancipation Fund. And we were able to donate, like we said, to Buxton, to Belladrum, and to Coffee 250. Welcome, all of you, and thanks for your contribution. Thank you so much for your contributions. I think you have answered the call, and of course, we said, we've got to develop the culture of supporting our causes. I want to thank all of you. I was saying that we had quite a time in Buxton, big crowd, and people were there from Buxton, of course, but people came from all over, from Georgetown, from along the East Coast, and it was beamed live, quite a bit. I was in Belladrum yesterday, and we stopped along the way, El Dorado, young people who recognize us and recognize Politics 101. though they recognize that we beamed the program from Buxton live. So many of them thanking us for our messages. I want to thank all of you, all those young people at El Dorado that we met, the people of Belladrum. Good evening. I had such a lovely time, such a warm welcome. You know, it's one thing to sit here and stand there and to, you know, do what we do. But it's another thing to get out there and get into the countryside and people recognize you and come up and remind you what you said, and they know your guests and they know what you stand for. I want to say so much thanks. Thanks to all of you there from West Berbice. And I made promises. I know I made promises, and I hope I can keep those promises of coming and spending more time in Region 5. I was asked that by many people. And the people in Belladrum, of course, have my contacts, and I promise. And so long as time and resources permit, I will spend more time in Region 5. We've been trying to do that for a long time. But sometimes, you know, you get pulled this way, pulled that way, and so forth. But I am going to do that. Thank you all so much in West Berbice. And I know that our friends on the other side tried a thing. They tried a thing. You know, those of you who followed what happened in Buxton knew the Prime Minister office called on the afternoon of our event in Buxton and instructed us that the Prime Minister will come in there and he will be the last speaker. And you all know that I don't do that. And I instructed the Prime Minister's representative that we have a program that we've been doing for 53 years. We have our guest speakers, and that no government has ever asked us, has never demanded of us that we must put them on the program. And I politely, but very sharply, said to the Prime Minister's representative, oh no. Oh no. But if the Prime Minister wanted to come to Buxton on Monday night, he was welcome to come, and I was going to give him part of my time to make remarks. I was allowed 10 or 15 minutes on the program. I was prepared to give him half of my time to make remarks if he came. But he was not going to, you know, the message was the Prime Minister said that he's Prime Minister and acting president, and he will come there and speak last. Oh no. Eventually, he decided not to come, thank God. Because when I told the audience on Monday night what happened, well, those of you who saw the program heard the response from that audience. And well, the Minister of Culture called and said he too wanted to come. But I understand his friends in Buxton told him it wasn't a good idea, so he never called back. And when we went up to Belladrum yesterday, I spoke. The main speaker there was Hamilton Green. And when we got there, the people met me outside, and they were very angry because they said the Minister of Public Service showed up. They were very angry. And I didn't say much, but when it was my turn to speak, I recognized the minister and I gave her a stern message to take to our principals. And I am going to pray that message at some point. But she stayed. Many of the villagers thought that after my message to her, she would have left, but she stayed. And when Hamilton Green came on to talk, he followed me and he asked the people to stand. And we said, you know, we are loving people, and if you're here, we welcome you with open arms. But we want you to know that we are not happy with the way the government that you represent is treating Black people. And so that was our experience. You know, as I said, I am waiting for my invite to the next Diwali and the next Pagwa. you know. Um, but the point is not these ministers turning up or the prime minister turning. He was free to. I would have glad if he had come to Boston, but to call and to say, "I am coming." This is hours before our program was due to start. I am coming. I am the acting president, and I will speak last. First of all, you're coming, then you will speak, and then you will speak last. And they apparently did that in other villages. But of course, Buxton and Buxton. So there we are, but it was a good weekend and we got our messages across. Welcome to all of you to Politics 101. And tonight we're going to have our brother, GHK Lall, is going to be here. He is here. So without further ado, as we would say, when them big people giving speech in the village, and they say, without further ado, let me bring in our brother tonight. Brother Gabriel, good evening.
Good evening to you and good evening to everyone. Good to be here.
I
Belated,
know
but
you have quite a bit to say about
yeah.
about emancipation, and I know you and I spoke before the program. I didn't mention to you the story of the government people trying to take over this story. Gosh, and what are your thoughts when you heard that?
Well, I'm thinking that in this country, according to the government, there is only one story, their narrative that must prevail and dominate at the expense of every other. And when they speak, there must be no other. It's not that it must only prevail and dominate. There must be no other narrative. This is the democracy that we pretend to have here. So when I hear you speaking about the Prime Minister's office weighing in and sort of impressing itself upon your proceedings, upon our proceedings, in a manner that is arrogant, I must call it as I see it, you're crushing my thing. You're a gate crusher, and you don't care how you do it. You're big and bad, so therefore we must be allowed to do that. And I think you are quite in order to say, look, it can't happen that way. If the Prime Minister, acting president, wants to come, he's welcome, and we'll take it from there. And we'll take it from there. And I'm glad to hear Elder Green. I think it's in Belladrum. You said
Yes, yes,
we must not allow ourselves to be dragged into the gutter. We must not allow ourselves to be. That is what is wished for. That is what is pushed for. And we must not cooperate in that in that kind of convention, in that kind of culture. Emancipation, and I think I should segue into there.
yes. Please do.
It's this wonderful time that after centuries of bondage, of agony, of distress, that a man like me really can't speak to, despite the poignancy, despite my own personal tragedies. There's nothing to compare to centuries of slavery and the emancipation that came. I want to take the folks here with us tonight and make some quick stops along the way to emancipation. And is emancipation for real? And is physical emancipation that I have no chains on my hands and no shackles on my feet? Is that all there is to it? After centuries of sapping my energy, my manhood, my womanhood, my vitality, my spirit, and you say, you are now free. Emancipation Proclamation, Abolition Act, America, England, and I'm on my own. I am on my own. I have known no other world but the world of slavery, but the world of the plantation and wherever the slave master took me. I think only black people can speak to that kind of harrowing experience, but I will try in my little humble way. That emancipation comes and a big to do is made about it by those who have freed us. Yes, we must recognize the efforts of Lincoln and Wilberforce and Granville Sharp and the Quakers and the black contributors. But at the same time, there are schools of thought and they are competing about the economics of slavery. The economics of slavery. The slave trade was abolished in 1807, 1808. But in 1793, 94, Eli Whitney came up with his cotton gin. And that extended slavery and led to the American Civil War, where 620,000 Americans died for freedom. And now the freedom is here. First was tobacco, then sugar, then indigo, then cotton. And now this freedom is here purchased in blood. And so where is the African American, the African Caribbean African, the Africans in the British West Indies, the African Guyanese? You are left on your own in a boat to travel up creek without a paddle, a leaky boat. The economic emancipation that should accompany physical emancipation is just not there. The provisions for it were not there. As a matter of fact, stepping back a little bit, emancipation did not really end in 1834. You had 4 more years for those who were in the house, and 6 more years under this for those in the field, under this business of apprenticeship, which also covered the manumitted to some extent. So really, emancipation was a force of circumstances, some of them not so benevolent, more economic, hard-nosed dollars and cents. But the reality is that the slaves are free. The slaves are free. So I'm coming there now from the 1830s, 1865, and here we are in 2023. We're in 2023, and we celebrated Emancipation Day yesterday. Wonderful day. A good memory, profound and poignant at the same time. But it's got its perversities in terms of, we can talk about Marley. We can talk about Bob Marley and Redemption Song, echoing the words of Marcus Garvey. Emancipate yourself from mental slavery. That's what we heard at the beginning of this program coming on last night. The mental slavery that compels the kind of thinking and the kind of action that was tried to be foisted upon the gathering in Buxton last night. So we have today in this country, we have something that can make a difference in this, that make all of us truly emancipated. It's not happening. We are the richest people in the world with the biggest GDP, and now the World Bank has classified us as high income. Each one of us, 13,845 US dollars per annum, gross national income per capita. That came out last week or the week before. That's about $3 million Guyana per year annually that we are. How many people in Guyana are emancipated to that extent? How many African Guyanese are emancipated to that extent? How many Amerindian Guyanese are emancipated, economically emancipated to that? And how many Indo-Guyanese? Yes, we do have. We do have Indo-Guyanese and we do have some African Guyanese and we do have some Amerindians from our society who are making $3 million a year. But how many in this 750, 780, 800,000 people? We have 11 billion barrels of oil and counting, and that's what we know about now. That's what has been released to us. on a per capita basis, given oil at $70, hovering between $75 and $80 a barrel, and 7 years since the first discovery of oil, we should be economically emancipated. We should not be talking about inflation. We should not have the carpetbaggers coming here and dictating to us what is good for us. Unless we, as a people in Guyana, emancipation means having that mental freedom, that liberty of the spirit to see not each other as an enemy, but to see who our real enemies are. Who our real enemies are. It's not one another. It's not the neighbor in the next village. It's not the man who and woman who doesn't look like you or who doesn't look like me. It's the ones who come here to exploit us and enrich themselves at our expense. When we can emancipate ourselves into that level of thinking, my sisters and brothers, my fellow Guyanese, then we are truly free. Then we have lifted the bar on ourselves. Then we have risen from where we are. Hundreds of years later, how much is it? 1833, 90, almost 200 years later, after the abolition of slavery, after emancipation in the British West Indies, we are still in that place where we were before. We are still in that place where we have just been freed. Whether sons of slaves or daughters of indentured servants, we are still in that place where today is the first day of freedom. And the question is, what do we do? What do I do with myself? And we have our leaders here amongst us who say, we will take care of you. We will take care of you, excuse me. We will look out for your interests. But instead of emancipating us, they have joined with the foreigners to exploit us, to enslave us again, to enslave us some more, to extend. Instead of emancipation, this oil has become our slavery.
Oil.
Cotton, when Eli Whitney discovered that cotton engine, cotton gin as they call it, extended slavery by decades. The discovery of oil reintroduced slavery into this country for the poor black man, Indian man, and Amerindian man, and mixed man and woman in this country. Let us face ourselves in the mirror. Let us look at one another and see for ourselves that oil, which really is the key to our economic emancipation, has really been now the conduit for the slavery that prevails in this land. You can't speak, you can't write, you can't have a meeting, you can't have a gathering, you can't have a conversation that says, you and we are going about this thing wrong. We are approaching it in the wrong way. When we say that, I become the enemy, David Hinds become the enemy, and whoever else becomes the enemy. We are not enemies. Do I look like an enemy of the state? Do I look that I want for what is wrong for Guyana? No, no. We've got other things to do and bigger and better things to do. But I cannot, coming from a poor background, I cannot pass a man in the street without asking me for $1 hanging out in front of my church, or reading about him in the paper, cost of living every week in Starbuck News from some community in this country, and say, well, you know, things gonna get better. Bear your chief. Not with 11 billion barrels of oil, not with when the world is calling me one of the richest men in the world, and you, a high income earner. This oil should have emancipated us. This oil should have lifted us up. This oil has the numbers, the economic and the financial underpinnings to take us to that state where we are not in mental slavery, but we are in financial freedom at a higher round.
GHK Lall, and it's a name that has become known to all of us. He writes, he speaks, and he speaks his mind. GHK, you at the beginning of your remarks tonight, you said something profound. To some people, it may not be profound to us, but to me and to Africans, it's profound. that the experience of enslavement is unique. It's a unique experience. And this was an experience that started with Black people as the victims. In fact, I laugh at times when people say, people like David Hines, all they talk about is race. And I ask myself whether these people know that the whole concept of race came and was created as an excuse, as an explanation for plantation slavery. The question was asked, why these dark-skinned people? Why enslave them? And the answer was that they have no soul, that they are not human beings, that God did not make them equal. Hence, the concept of race. And I laugh when people say that people like me, we are preoccupied with race. And why not? Race was created to enslave and keep us in bondage for 200 and odd years in Guyana and for 400 years. In total, if we take it from the beginning to the end. And so when it comes to this question of slavery, it is not that Africans are the only people who should speak about slavery. But having been the victims of slavery, they have a unique perspective and a unique story to tell. And when you started, you were very respectful. And so when people tell us to stop being Africans, why you harping on race, why you harping on slavery, it is so disrespectful. And they don't even know, well, some of them don't know it, that they're being so disrespectful. And when you began to talk tonight, you pay us that respect. And as a people, every group of people, respect and honor is very much part of that group. And they don't know how disrespectful they are. I look at Freddie Kissoon and Gildari last night with some conky on their program making fun, and have James Bond and Ras Dalgetty sit down there and making fun and saying, David, I wouldn't like this conky because it's made by Indians, and James Bond had the presence of mind to say, this is not real conky. African people don't put raisin in their conky. and James was so profound, and beat him back. But the fact that they can go up there and try to make fun of a food that is sacred to Black people on Black People's Day shows the kind of ignorance that is here. Thank you, GHK, for respecting us and saying that as Africans, we do have a particular perspective on this issue of race and slavery that others do not have. It doesn't mean that others should not speak on it. And as you said, you will speak on it, and you said you will speak on it from your perspective as an Indian man. And I want to say, on behalf of myself, on behalf of the Africans on this program, on behalf of African guys, that's what we ask for recognition that we're not crazy people, and that race is real for us. It's real, and it hurts when people try to tell us, stop being African and being Guyanese. It hurts us, and people meet me every day and complain about it. Complain about it. Thank you, Gabriel, for respecting Black people and respecting us. I've been reading you, everything you write. And you said something on this program and you put it in written form. And you talk about your first encounter with Malcolm and Martin and Stokely Carmichael. And I want you to tell that story, because again, I use the word profound. It's profound. For us, what it shows is that one encounters, one has an initial response because it's coming from where one is. But as one begins to reflect, one begins to expand the place where one comes from. But tell it in your own words.
Well, I've been thinking about writing that for a long time, especially given where we are in oil Guyana today. And it came to me, I get these what I would call, and forgive me for being a little haughty here, what I call these little epiphanies at 3 a.m. in the morning, in the quiet of the morning. That's when my thinking, it's pretty free flowing. And I'm saying, wait a minute. And I went back, and I could have gone back to Marcus Garvey and W.E.B. Du Bois and the other stalwarts in the pantheon. But somehow I stopped at Malcolm. I started at Malcolm X. And I remember how he used to be pretty fiery. Audubon Ballroom and across America. Now he became a reviled figure. His language was sharp. That's putting it mildly. His language was what we would call combustible today. The white devil, the blue-eyed devil. And I said to myself, this man is a real radical. He's a revolutionary. He's out there. He's extreme. And along down the line, you had Jim Brown, the American football player, Cincinnati Browns and Bengals, and he, tremendous football player. And he was outspoken, and he pulled no punches. And Muhammad Ali, who could forget Cassius Marcellus Clay, the Louisville Lip? Muhammad Ali. I will stand and I will fight, and I will speak and I will be right. I mean, those are my words. And I said, these guys are really, really beyond the pale. And down the line, Louis Farrakhan. I mean, he took it to the extreme of the extreme. And then we have on the other side of the coin, Michael Jordan, the good Negro, excuse me, and the quiet guys. Even Magic Johnson, who has done a lot for his people. Patrick Ewing, our brother from Jamaica. I think he talks out now. But sticking with the Malcolm and the Muhammad Ali, Malcolm X and Muhammad Ali, those figures, I said these guys were wrong. These guys were too aggressive and in the face. But then I go back to what I started this program with and what David expounded upon so eloquently and so fervently a moment ago, was that the experience and agony of African Americans, Black people, in the American experience, nobody could experience it like they did. So yes, they expressed and then they evolved. They evolved. And as they evolved, they expanded. And as they expanded, they enhanced. Life is a transition, it's not static. That's part of the emancipation from mental slavery that Marcus Garvey spoke about in Nova Scotia in 1937, and Bob Marley did in his Uprising album in, I think, 1980. Redemption Song. Memorable, memorable, memorable. I mean, every time I hear that, the hair on my skin crawls, rises, whatever it is. I mean, there's only an acoustic guitar, and this guy is singing his soul out. Forget about his heart. Our mind must be sovereign, and that is what Malcolm. I saw these guys as being on the wrong side because we are conditioned to be Christian and courteous and compromising and cowering. And because they didn't cower, because Malcolm X didn't cower, And Muhammad Ali didn't cover. They had to reduce them to how they did. And that's what they want to do today to black Guyanese, and that they want to do to people like me and others who speak. We have to come to that space. If this country is to get anywhere, if this country is to be about healing, truly national healing, I want to be a part of that conversation. I believe I belong in that conversation. I will not be left out of that conversation, even if I have to be on the periphery. From the periphery, my voice will resound, maybe like John the Baptist, even louder, even more piercingly. But in a nutshell, I thought Malcolm and Muhammad were wrong. They were going about it wrong, and the results were wrong. But little did I know, and I know now, and I think I know more than enough, is that pain. It's the expression of that pain, the expression of the essence of suffering, the essence of suffering that no one else, not even indentures, not even the personal tragedies that we have, that is a pathos, the pathos of a people through an extended passage of time. I mean, anguish and agony. Look at the spirituals. Listen to those spirituals and hear men sweeping with a machete, a cutlass, day after day, hour after hour, year after year. And you get a sense of the great pain that Malcolm X and Muhammad Ali were expressing in their ways. And you know what? Though they have tempered their language, they were not wrong in the first place. And we, though we live in a politically correct time, we must still find a way to get our messages across and in the face and in the ear and into the hearts of those that are looking to enslave us again today. In this time of emancipation, there will be no need for emancipation if there was no slavery. My fellow Guyanese, listeners, wherever you may be, there would be no need, no talk, no necessity for emancipation or liberty if there is no captivity. And captivity was the reality of the black experience. And so, now we have the freedom that could be made possible by this oil well, this patrimony. We should no longer be talking about economic emancipation. We should have it. We should have it. We should have it side by side, step by step, and a place at the table. And that's the story where I am. That is where I have. Well, I think I was there from the beginning. The language, the differences in the expressions of my brothers who are now gone in America are gone because I understand. I understand the root of it. I understand the flowering of it. I understand the rage behind it. And we too must have a sufficiency of that rage that nobody will mistake it. Nobody will mistake it for being pretended, quasi, pseudo. It's real. You know why? Because it's lived with. He who knows what it is, I don't know your pain, but I know, and I don't know how much your stomach gnaws when you're hungry. But he who knows it, who lives it, knows it. And therefore, in this rich country, just should not be. Every day is Emancipation Day. Every day must be that freedom because God has given us, through nature and geology, that patrimony that where all of us should have a piece of it in our palms.
GHK Lall, welcome to all of you to Politics 101 tonight. I said in Buxton on Monday night that God put the wealth, the oil in our earth, in our water. And I knew they were going to come for me. And this morning I got a call and said that they're on you, Dr. Hines. They're saying when you said to black people that God put the oil in the earth, and I continue to say, and it must be shared equal among all Guyanese. They said that I was saying, talking to black people And so when I tell them God put the oil in the earth, I must be telling them that a black God put it there in the earth, and that is theirs and theirs alone. GHK, I mean, I mean,
Well, I
is
think I think this is how the message gets distorted. It's a black God put it, the black gold, and he put it in the black part of the earth. He put it in the black part of the earth. I think
I always thought that God is universal, and I fight among Africanists who fight against a European God. And I always
yes.
say God is universal. That is
Mhm,
Allah, Jah, or whoever is a universal God. But
mhm.
here I was making an argument for their common ownership. So I didn't say man put it there because then you can go to woman, a black man, a white man. I said God. And they said, well, I was telling black people the oil is theirs alone. I'm amazed at the extent to which people are prepared to go to create the conditions for a new form of economic slavery. And slavery started out as an economic enterprise with the development of technology that cotton gin. Slavery started out as an economic project that over time it became political, sociological, cultural, and it encompasses everything. It encompasses everything. Our voices have to be continue to be heard. And Gabriel, I'm so glad that you have taken a stand, that your voice is going to be your voice and it comes out of your experience. Our president is in China. So the average Guyanese, the president gone on a trip. He goes to trips all the time. Presidents around the world, they go to trips all the time. But something tells me when a president of a country in the Western Hemisphere that moves from the second poorest country in the hemisphere to the second richest, perhaps the richest in terms of the growth rate. And at a time when the world is engulfed in superpower competition, that a visit by the president of Guyana to the United States or to China or to Russia, there is something more in the mortar than the pistol. Am I wrong?
No, you're absolutely correct. You're on the right track here because let's go back. We found first oil in 2015. Secretary of State Pompeo came here in 2020. That's not normal. U.S. Secretary of State. And then we had the president and the vice president summoned, and I keep using that word summoned, to the United States to meet with Secretary Blinken. Less than a year later, Secretary Blinken, the United States of America's Secretary of State, finds his way back to Guyana and to meet with the president and the opposition leader. I can't remember if he met with the vice president. I'd be surprised if he didn't. Energy security, food security. I think all the others are a wash. Energy security is what it is because of the Saudis and OPEC Plus peeling away from Western influence, looking more towards China and India. And so Guyana becomes very, very crucial to America, oil and gas. America has helped us immensely, or has interfered enormously in our electoral processes over the decades. We are right here geographically, 5.5 hours. U.S. Southern Command is always prowling our waters. Now, put all those things together. Guyana is a jewel in America's crown right now. America's crown might be a little tattered, might be a little faded, especially given its debt load and its divisions at home and so on and so forth, and with rising competition from China. The last thing that any government of Guyana, any president wants to do is not to go to Africa or India, but to go to China and to get wrapped up in something with which the United States of America has got a tremendous amount of anxiety about, that Belt and Road Initiative. The Belt and Road Initiative has tied up Pakistan into knots wherever it goes. In some places, I think Bolivia, don't hold me to that, is one. There has been problems with that Belt and Road Initiative. It looks pretty good at the beginning, only for countries to realize that the Chinese are not into free lunches. America is not into free lunch either. But here's the story. We cannot be doing the level of business with China as we are doing. And for the president to go and tie more bundle for Guyana on behalf of Guyana with China, when America is hovering over our shoulder, when America holds the keys in Guyana, controls Guyana. Let's get that straight. We may think we are a democracy. We may think we are a national sovereignty and all of that. Lovely on paper. America is calling the shots here, and I will not back away from that today or any time. I've said it yesterday, I'm saying it today, and I'll say it tomorrow. So help me God. Guyana is almost a 51st state of the USA presently. The president, before, if you go back, before Mr. Blinken come here, there was an announcement of a visit to China. Then that disappeared off the radar. Then he came. We dropped everything and we were around him. Guyana is important to the USA. And when we forget that, and we go and have the kind of money dealings, the kind of intricate and intimate dealings with a competing superpower of the stature of China, which is in America's craw, we are asking for trouble. We are asking for serious trouble. The Americans already have problems, concerns about the heavy Chinese presence in this country. These are the things that don't make it into the media. These are not speculative. This is real politics. This is superpower politics. This is geostrategic, geopolitical, and blah, blah, blah. Here's the story. For us to bait these people, it is not good for Guyana. I would have no problems with, we need to be friends with the Chinese and one China and all of that business. That's fine. Don't go and sign with these people. The president, in his defense, has said, and the vice president says, well, America has neglected us. Then we have to take the terms that China is offering us and say, Mr. Secretary, we're getting $5 billion at 5%. You compete with that, that's business. You compete with that at 4.5% and better terms, we are on your side of the border. We want the money so we can feed our people, we can engage in development, and we can lift our country up. We will do it with you. We'll do it with Exim Bank. But the terms have to be competitive when compared to the Chinese. Now, there's another thing why the government of Guyana likes to do business with the Chinese. When the IDB and the World Bank, those financial institutions of the West, most of them, let's stick to the IDB and World Bank, they come and scrutinize how you spend the money, David. They come and do that and write reports. The Chinese don't do that. They don't give a hang about money laundering. They will give the best of lip service to us. They don't care if you take all that money and steal it. We lent you. When you gotta repay, you better repay, or we're gonna seize your airport. The government of Guyana, this PPP government, loves that. There is no accountability for the loans. They don't have to. The Chinese are not going to come here and say, "Well, you didn't spend the money on the hospital or the road you say you're going to build, so are we going to write a report with it?" Those go into a black hole. Money's borrowed. Guyanese people got to repay it. That's why we like to do business with China. It's easier, it's more seamless, and there are no watchdogs over this. There are no, but you come. So the first part of the problem is that we are losing money with these deals, meaning that when we get robbed, we don't know by the politicians. This the bigger part, the bigger thing, is that when we go and do business at this level for these amounts with the Chinese, we are incurring the wrath of the Americans. Now, I want to switch this, and some people disagreed with me heavily on this. The PNC, the major opposition in this country, it cannot go out there and shout, "Down with Exxon." It does that, it's done with the PNC. Let me get that straight. A lot of people want that. It can't say that, but it's got to find ways to mobilize its people and somehow nuance its message. But here's what I think it has been holding itself out as the better alternative than the PPP to the Americans. The Americans are the one who calls the shots. They're going to determine who's the next government. So here's the thing: they play the cards right. The Americans go and the Guyana government, the PPP government goes and continue this nonsense. I think it's too far gone already with the Chinese. The door is opened for the PNC to get a resurgence in life, political life, and I've said that and I've put that on the table, and I'm not moving from that because I believe it's got viability. It's got viability. The Americans do not want the Chinese here in their backyard. They don't want them here, right here, when we've got Venezuelan oil and we've got the Crescent in Suriname and Guyana's oil. They want Western companies here. BP, Chevron. They don't have a problem with ENI and Total. Those are part of the Western Alliance. Don't want any Chinese businesses here, supermarkets, etc. That's fine. But here's this. I think there's an opportunity for the political opposition in this country to make hay with this, but they got to play their cards right. I've warned the PPP government, don't go down publicly, don't go down that path. They're like, you don't know anything. We're going to go down, like everything else. We're decided on this, and they have their objectives, and so we end up where we end up. We cannot afford to be caught between two competing superpowers.
We cannot afford to be caught between two competing superpowers in the 70s, the 80s, in the middle of the Cold War. Guyana embraced the non-aligned approach, and Mr. Lall is saying here, and he said, the Americans determine who governs. Now we do go to elections, Mr. Lall, and we do vote. Some people say we determine who governs. How do you explain that?
Well, I've heard that.
Yes.
I've heard that before, and I've gotten that pushback. We've had that, and we've heard about free and fair and democracy, etc.
Yes.
Let's look at this. Let's take the last election, the 2020 election. The people have told me that the times have changed and it's a different world and all of that. I agree. There's some credence to that. The Americans, all they had to do in 2020, 2019, and 2020 was to say, during the electoral impasse, was that this is a decision for the Guyanese people to handle amongst themselves. Neatly take themselves out, and as the Americans go, B, C, and E, and the rest would have gone. And I don't know where we would have gone, but the fact of the matter is that it would have been a different story. They have done this before in the 60s, or they had an active hand. Now they'll play it in a more nuanced fashion. In the olden days, a Nicolas Maduro would be gone. would have been history already. Well, that's part of the new dispensation. We're more
Yes.
civilized,
Yes.
and sanctions. And what sanction is a bloodless coup, right? Sanction is an ongoing bloodless coup with the same objective. We're gonna squeeze you till you holler, and then you're gonna say, all right, let go. And so that's the story there. So we come back to Guyana. I'm saying yes, we vote, but the Panamanians voted, and we have voted before, and the Americans stood by and say, well, the processes of democracy have got to be respected, and they leave you to your own. And they leave you to your own. You've got to figure that out. And we really should be left to our own to figure out our own destiny. This has been my everything at all. Look at us. Look at us currently. We can't figure out a single problem by ourselves. We've got to run to somebody else. Aren't we always going? Do we go call on some respected Guyanese scholar or Guyanese body? No, we are going to someplace else to get our business resolved. We are calling on, and we're not talking about elections here. We are running to somebody else to get our matters sorted out. We don't fix anything here anymore. We don't fix anything because everything becomes PPP, PNC, Indian black, black Indian. And so we got to go somewhere where we think, and then we fight long after about that. That's what I said just now. We have to begin the process of a national conversation with one objective in mind: national healing. And when we open our minds to that, then we begin to emancipate our mind, and we can dictate where we are going to go.
GHK Lall, and talking about external affairs and the impact on countries, we had a coup in the countries in Africa. They sometimes pronounce it as Niger, some pronounce it as Niger. But there was a coup there, and all hell has broken loose in Western Africa. Um, Niger is important because I think it's an oil rich country. And there was
Uranium.
uranium, sorry, not oil, uranium. And there was a coup there. And it is having effect throughout West Africa, and it's going to take in the rest of Africa. The United States and the British and others have weighed in. GHK, what early lessons there for Guyana?
Well, let's look at the story of Niger. And I'm more comfortable with the pronunciation of Niger.
Yes,
The democratically elected government, and you've got this presidential guard general, Abdul Rahami Tichiani, a general. He's in charge now. He was given an ultimatum of a week, and he's still there by the African body, which is led by
ECOWAS.
Nigeria.
ECOWAS.
ECOWAS, yeah. Now, according to the people behind the coup and the supporters of the coup, and by that I mean General Tichiani all the way down, his people, corruption, that should sound familiar.
Yes,
Social anxieties, I'm using my words here, that should
yes,
sound poor governance, that should
yes,
sound familiar, and some other and economic hardship. Economic hardship. Niger is a country where people exist. There's 24.4 million inhabitants.
hmm
That's 30 times Guyana's population, give or take. Niger is a country where many in the population exist on $2.15 a day. That's less than half our 50% that the World Bank identified. Remember 50% on $5.50 a day,
yes,
1,100
yes,
Ghana dollars a day. We've got a whole set of people. I can't remember what was the percentage, excuse me. But it's a significant percentage of people in Niger who are struggling, scratching out a living on $2.15 US a day. 400 and what's that? $430 a year. We think we were doing so bad on 1100. So we're talking here about less than half of what 50% of our people are dealing with. Now, corruption, we'll hold that, we'll leave that alone. Cost of living, economic hardship, $5.50 versus $2.15. The Niger is the seventh largest producer of uranium, very much needed for nuclear purposes in Europe, former French colony. The French and the US have military bases there. All right, they have military bases there, and they're, to use diplomatic speak, we are gravely concerned. Okay, I think they should be. Now, the there comes a time, there comes a time when people can't take things anymore.
Yeah.
The coup in Niger, whether you agree with coup or you disagree with them, whether you back them or don't, or shrink from them, and this business about democratically elected governments, etc. I want to make my story plain. When governments are dealing right by the people and for the people, coups, coups cannot succeed.
Yeah.
Coups do not come into play. But when people don't know where to turn to, have got nothing left to live for but their next $402.15 a day, however that is doled out to them, how they earn that, then what do they have to live for? What do they have to give to their children? $2.15 in Niger. You got three children. Now we're talking about a modern cosmopolitan family unit of three children. It might be six. What do you do with $2.15? In this country, what do you do with $5.50 a day? Half of our population. Unlike Niger, Guyana has a lot of claims to fame. Some of them I mentioned earlier. Biggest GDP per capita per person in the world. Let's cut out this thing about in the running. I have done the calculations and I'm pretty good at this. This is part of my prior life. Our GDP is on top of the world. We are, because of this oil, the richest people on earth, right? We are now high income, according to the World Bank. So put it those three things. So we've got people struggling in this country. We've got people who are very disillusioned with government. We've got a lot of PPP supporters, poor Indian Guyanese, who are disgruntled. Will they vote differently? I doubt it. I doubt it. But what I'm saying to you is that people are somewhere along the line, somebody takes matters in their own hands. Africa, here's a little tidbit. Do you know? In the last 60 years, Africa's had 60 coups. 60. Here's the other part. Out of those 60, almost half have succeeded. So, ambition, conviction, vision,
Mhm.
you tell me. We don't know where Niger is going to go. I am hoping that Guyana does not keep going down this road where some madman decides, I am not waiting on a leader, where somebody decides to take everything in their hands and the top blows here. We've got enough frustrated people here, Dr. Hines. We have got enough people who are simmering. We have got enough people in this country who are saying, I ain't getting nothing, but I've seen everybody else getting. Of course, it takes on all kinds of tones and overtones and undertones. Here is the reality. How long do we pretend to put powder, Johnson baby powder, on our faces, spray some cologne, and say, hey, you're looking good, you're smelling good? When the reality is that I am rotting away. I am decaying away from hunger, from weakness, from frustrations. And that is where the Niger story, somehow Chad is coming up with the Niger story, is has got some trouble for me, some anxieties for me because of Guyana. This oil here, oil has brought in, we say, oil has brought in new slave. I say oil has brought in new slavery. I am saying further, look at, go back to Niger. Two countries, Burkina Faso and what's the other one? Mali, have
Mali,
said, yes, have
Mali.
said, hey, listen, we are with Niger, so y'all don't think that you come in here and beat up these people, right? We are prepared to help them out militarily. We can put we money where we out there, right? So the thing about this is that this conflict can blow up in West Africa. In this country, I am concerned about where we are and where things could blow up. You keep pressing people. Look, David Patterson, I met him once or twice. I hear the charges, the allegations, but you're gonna slap this man with $200,000 bail? I mean, a man shot a woman, his fiancee or his paramour or whatever, somewhere in the interior, in the belly, and nothing came out of that matter.
Mhm.
The run should have been to Brazil, and then she said, I ain't filing nothing. My position is the state has an interest there, regardless of who filed complaint or not. Somebody gets shot. Somebody fired a gun, their licensed firearm, in a reckless manner. But different strokes, different folks, different strokes. Now we have got these situations that are not imaginary, they are not exaggerated, but they are many, and they happen all the time, where people feel a sense of wrong, of being wrong, of being victimized, of being demonized, of being ostracized. Look, the fact that I'm on this program, the fact that I am not black but I'm speaking out, that counts against me. I become an enemy. So the police is looked upon as being an arm of the state and against people who the government don't like. The media is being coerced. The public service is being squeezed. The judiciary is up in the air. So people are asking themselves, what do we have here? What do we have for a government? We have a president that tells you whatever he feels like and feel that you must accept that as gospel. We have a vice president, a former president, who goes around in circles and expect you to tell him that's a straight line, right? Or whatever. So, in other words, what I'm saying, the pressures are building up. This society is tense. There is a strong sense that our rich natural resources, looking 120 miles out of sea, are not being shared on an equitable basis. We have got the pressure cooker on the fire for a problem. Unless we watch that thing carefully, it could blow up in we face. That's my concern. That's why I thought about Niger. That is what I don't like what is going on in Niger and what I hope never happens here. But, but, who is listening?
Who is listening? Guyana, China, Niger, the dooms stare us in the face. The comparative analysis there by GHK Lall, Niger and Guyana. Niger and Guyana. We want to thank you all for staying with us tonight. It's the day after emancipation. We continue this month. Next week, Thursday, on the 10th, we're going to have the annual EUC Guyana Emancipation Symposium. And it's going to be a big team there. And of course, we expect those of you in or around Buxton to attend, and we will be streaming live to those of you who are far away. We want to thank GHK for coming on tonight and for sharing his thoughts with us. And we continue to do what we intended to do in the first place, and that is to educate, to mobilize people, and to act as a source of information, not only about our Guyana situation, but our linkages with the rest of our Caribbean, the Western Hemisphere, and the world. So that's why tonight we went to Niger and, of course, China, because the president is visiting. Gabriel, your closing thoughts.
We've got a long road ahead of us. Against the backdrop of yesterday's emancipation, the emotions, the sentiments, the expectations, the road ain't going to be easy. We each have to do our part. It starts with us recognizing that we are on the cusp of what could be great and good for this country, for each citizen. Not just black Guyanese or Amerindian or Indian, but every single citizen of this country. We have the resources, we have the God given gifts, not for one or for some or for a fraction, but for all. There's nothing erratic about this, there's nothing radical. This is a reality. This is our new Guyanese reality that my grandparents used to talk about among themselves with their friends. Of course, it's not on land, it's 120 miles offshore, but it's just as tangible for us. And we must feel that palpability in our hands for our children and their children. We have some work ahead to do. We've been given the riches. We've got to learn how to get our share of it. We've got to link arms, grasp, extend our hands, grasp each other in friendship, and begin a process of mending and healing in this country. As an East Indian man, I don't know if what's the word now, East Indian or I don't get caught up in these things. As a Guyanese man, I want to do my part in this. I'm willing to sit down with anybody. I'm willing to sit down with anybody. As you know, some other people have invited me and I've held them off. So I we have our work to do. We have a country to build. We have a people to lift up. We have circumstances from which to rest ourselves out of. The numbers are there, they favor us. Why am I still lining up for a visa at Duke Street to go to where? To live in a basement and do what? To do what? When my milk and honey could be right here. David, you know you've lived in Arizona. Don't know where you were before Arizona. You know about me. 31 years in the United States. New York, Boston, hundreds of flights, working for the Yankee dollar. I used to think that I wanted to come back here and it was this wonderful thing that I am going to come and give back. God has plans for each one of us, and I think He's got plans for this country. I know that, and I don't know what part I have, but I think that this work that I'm doing and you are doing, as crude as it may be, as unsophisticated as it may be, or as intellectually enormous as it may be, it's got its merits. It has its value. And if each one of you can take to heart what we are saying here today, what the other speakers have said before, what the others are going to say tomorrow, and say, let us lift ourselves up by our shoelaces and gather in our arms what belongs to us. My fellow Guyanese, that's how we emancipate ourselves. That's how our mind becomes sovereign. I don't want anybody to tell me what to think. or what to say. I just want to be a law-abiding citizen, but I want to get what is right for me. That's what Malcolm was fighting for, and Muhammad, and Jim Brown, and Stokely. And that's what you and I must fight for. Nothing that is worthwhile ever comes to pass without a struggle. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. And that last quotation there, very close to the quotation from Frederick Douglass: power concedes nothing without a demand. What we get is what we fight for. Good night, my brother, and thanks. And to you, our audience, those of you who continue to stand with us, thank you for coming through again tonight. And you all will see me tomorrow night. And tomorrow night, we are going to be responding to some of the issues that have been raised over the Emancipation Weekend. But we continue the month, Emancipation Month. So I'm going to see you all here tomorrow night. Same time. And as usual, as I say, love is our watchword. I love you. I love all of you profoundly and sincerely.